French. Present. Alderman Arnowitz.
Here.
Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Tyus. Chairman Rhodey.
Present.
Board present. We have a quorum.
All right. Today we're taking up Board Bill number 137, which is our annual block grant appropriation. We have our fearless leader of the Community Development Agency with us today to kind of walk us through this. And I think at this point we'll turn it over to
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I appreciate this Board Bill 137, being placed on the agenda today. I'd like to walk through it with you. We have, this is our annual action plan. It's a submission of a grant to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. It'll be about a 16-point, these are estimates that I'm giving you. We won't know for certain until next spring, but the best estimate is about $16.8 million in community development block grant funds, $2 million in home funds, $1.3 million in emergency solution grants. That program is administered by the City Department of Human Services, and then $1.3 million in HOPWA. That's Housing Opportunities for People with AIDS. That program is administered by the city's health department. I'd like to walk through the appendix, which really is the guts of the bill. And if you look at Appendix A, pages 1 through 3, there's a public services. We have just under $3.2 million allocated to public services. We are restricted by HUD regulations to a cap of 19%, and that is what the funding that we have in the bill comes to. What we looked at when we looked at these proposals were capacity, impact, and leverage. Capacity: can the organization that's making the proposal actually provide the services they're proposing to do? Impact: what impact is it going to have in low and moderate income people living in the city of St. Louis? And leverage: does the organization have additional funding, and what are those sources? There were over 100 proposals. We had 3 or 4 raters on each proposal. The raters were primarily outside raters, that is, non-city staff. They were from a philanthropic community, business, and professionals in various fields. They were supplemented by some city staff, health department, street department, Board of Public Services, CDA, all had some assisted in some fashion. So that was on page 1 through 3 of Appendix A. You also have a map of where the organizations that are being funded have offices. It doesn't, obviously, some of them provide services in different sectors of the city, others provide services throughout the city. But what you have is the locations, and you also have there a key identifying which organizations are where. Also on page 3, there's $1 million for LRA. That is the same funding as last year, and that takes care of a number of costs, including grass cutting, tree removal, trash removal, board up. The city, there's $525,000 of that $1 million goes into general revenue. It is it results from the work that the Forestry Division does on LRA lots. If you look at page 4,
excuse me.
Yes.
Fred, you said the $3.1 million was the 19% that hit the 19% service level.
Yes.
And then the $500,000 that goes into general fund, is that not considered services then, or?
The $500,000 is that's for LRA board up is $1 million, and $525,000 of that $1 million goes back to general revenue. It goes into general revenue.
But that's not considered a city service?
It's not part of the grant program. But, I mean, it is a city service.
Okay, I guess I'm confused. I thought you said that there was a cap at 19% on.
19% for public services,
Oh, public, being,
being those 100, the 48 grants
okay,
that were awarded amounts to $3,173,000. And those are primarily to non-city agencies. But included in there is expanded recreation and the problem property work that the city legal staff does. Does that answer the question?
I guess, I mean, I'm not, I guess I've always had trouble understanding what they consider public services, because I would think that funding LRA would be anytime that they're giving money to the city, I thought that would be a public service, but
It's under HUD, under HUD regulations, it's not, it doesn't fall within that definition.
okay. You and I have had these conversations, and I can never quite keep track in my own mind all the caps that they have, because I think you said there's a cap on the amount of overhead, and
There's a 20% cap on planning and administration, and then a 19% cap on public services, or non-housing services. Okay, where are we at? Page 4. We have $800,000 allocated to low-mod homeowner assistance. This is for minor home repair. Senior Home Security has the bulk of it, but there are 4 other agencies, 2 north, 2 south, that are awarded $40,000 grants that would do minor home repair, as well as Harambee Youth. We have $100,000 in there for tuck pointing. Page 4, again, is Healthy Home Repair, $2.5 million there. That program can provide up to $30,000 per household. First $10,000 is forgivable. The remainder is a zero-interest loan, which is primarily payable at, generally it's payable at the sale of the property. Housing production on page 5. Almost $2.4 million. That would fund our housing funding rounds. We had one in the spring at $2.7 million. We have one currently underway at $4 million. The notice of funding availability was sent out September 26th. On November 7th is the deadline for proposals, and awards would be made on December 3rd. Page 5 also has a commercial district. It's $1 million. That is for the facade. It's what we would commonly call a facade program. That's the same funding as has been in the last few years, for $1 million. In their economic development, we've got primarily the $400,000 loan pool money for SLDC. They use it for small business loans. Under public facilities, we have $500,000 for Better Family Life. This is for a 3rd floor build out at their building on Page. They're going to have banking facility there, as well as a business assistance center and an incubator, business incubator. We also have $1 million allocated for for a People's Health Center. That is for construction of a multi-million-dollar mental health facility on Del Mar. And they're currently in the fundraising part of that development. Page 7, public improvements. You see there's 3 funding proposals for street and sidewalk improvements. We only received 3 proposals. All 3 were funded, at least in part. And we also have on page 7 a Section 108 loan. That's $1.3 million. That's going to be payable until 2020, when that'll be paid off. That's for the Doris Webby and neighborhood improvements. It totaled $30 million, and it was funded, I think, in year 2000. It's a 20-year loan. the amount that we're going to be paying will go up a little bit until it's about $1.6 million in years 18, 19, and 20. On page 7, you see the CDA rehab admin, that's $820,000. That pays for the housing analysts that we have, the architectural review office, as well as a building inspector that inspects all the CDA projects to ensure that they are being constructed in the manner that they proposed. We also have $1.5 million for our CDA general admin, so our total budget is a little over $2.3 million, and that our budget was approved, of course, in June of this year. The federal grants, there's $34,000 in there. That's the comptroller does some work on the federal grants. The $170,000 for legal services, that money, those are for 3 lawyers. It's primarily, I should say, partial salary for 3 lawyers. That is, their work is primarily done for SLDC. We have a minority contractors initiative. The SLDC will receive the money, but they are going to contract with MOCAN, and they're working on that, meeting to work out that arrangement now. And let's see, we have $398,000 in for SLDC admin, and then $100,000 for to Urban Strategies for a planning proposal that they're putting together with to HUD, which, if it's successful, would ultimately lead to a $30 million grant for the O'Fallon Place area. That, I'd say that concludes my remarks that I would give as an overview. I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have. I would like to, though, ask Alana Green, our Director of Administration, to join me and give a brief overview of 3 programs that we're funding. I think it'd be helpful for the committee to get a little more detail on some of these programs, and Alana can give us, I think, an excellent overview. She was directly responsible for the way this process was handled and overseeing it and managing it.
Fred, just so make sure I can understand this, you have the total column as the first column, and then there's the 2015 proposed community development block grant, and then you have the proposed home.
Yes.
So, okay, and the home program again is the homeowner initiative. That's going to, or the home investment program. It's a separate funding program from HUD. We have 2 that are direct that we administer at CDA. One is the Community Development Block Grant Fund, and the other is the Home Fund. The Home Funds are more restricted to low-income projects. Okay, but that they're actually trying to get bricks and mortar out of.
Yes.
Okay, so that's actually designed to provide some sort of level of subsidy to bring down the cost of home ownership.
Yes. Well, for instance, there's a $17 million project, North Sarah Phase 3, and we're providing $1 million in assistance to make that go. Part of that $1 million will be in home funds.
And I'm sorry, I'm still learning a lot of this stuff. You said that there was so we had the initial round of home announcements was relatively recently.
June, yes.
And then the next one's going to be in
December.
Okay. And the first one was for how much?
2.7 million, and this is for 4 million.
Okay. And that's the one in December is not on
That's right.
That'll be a separate,
That's from money that's already been funded.
okay. Just because of the complexity of this, why don't we just take a breather for a second and give, you know, anybody who wants to ask Fred before we bring Alana up, any questions? Alderwoman Davis, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Alderman Arnold, okay. And I do not see Alderman French present, so, okay, why don't we go ahead and Alana?
Good morning. As Fred mentioned, I'm going to give a brief description of 3 of the programs that we're proposing to be funded for 2015. The first one is the Youth Learning Center. The organization was founded in 2000, and their mission is to provide unique academic and enrichment experiences for youth from underserved communities. They accomplished this mission by providing 1st through 8th graders access to 21st century education in the fields of science, technology, engineering, art, and math, and that's also known as STEAM in the education community. Through the program, students are exposed to exciting technology-based academic achievement activities in a newly constructed, cutting-edge 15,000 square foot building located at 4471 Olive. The program that we're funding, or we're proposing to be funded, is called Resources for Learning, and it meets from 2:30 to 6:30 during the school year. Transportation to the center is provided to the students by the student school, family members, or when needed, the program actually picks children up from school. 100% of the students are residents of the city of St. Louis, residing in the following zip codes: 63103, 63106, 63108, 63110, 63112, 63113, and 63118. 93% of the students are African American, and 66% live in poverty. 50% of the students attend St. Louis Public Schools. The Youth Learning Center has approximately 100 active volunteers, and they're accredited through the St. Louis for Kids, United Way, and they're a certified volunteer agency. The next program is the Urban League.
What's the name of that program? I'm sorry.
The organization is Youth Learning Center.
And we funded that out of our community service portion, is that correct?
Yes, public service.
What page was that on?
It should be on the 1st or 2nd page of the exhibit.
What was it called?
It's Youth Learning Center.
Oh, here it is. Okay, so we funded that for what, $50,000?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
what was your next one then?
The Urban League, their amount that we're proposing to be funded is $100,000 for 2 different programs. The Urban League has been providing services, as we all know, for almost 100 years, and its mission is to empower African Americans and others throughout the St. Louis region in securing economic self-reliance, social equality, and civil rights. The Urban League operates 25 programs in the St. Louis metropolitan area, including the city, the county, and then also St. Clair County. We recommended funding for 2 of the programs, as I mentioned, the Ready to Work program and the Resident Leadership Training program. The Resident Leadership Training program is specifically targeted to work with the Federation of Block Units, which is comprised of 125 block units with over 1,200 members. The Ready to Work program excuse me, will work with members of the community to address barriers to employment. So the Urban League will have employment counselors on staff who will work with people looking for jobs individually to assess their needs and also to help them find a job. The third program is Gateway EITC, and their proposed amount is $30,000. Founded in 2002, Gateway's mission is to strengthen the financial security of low to moderate income families by providing free income tax services. Excuse me. Since 2002, the organization has prepared 50,000 federal returns at no charge and brought more than $59 million in refunds to the community. For the 2014 tax season, the volunteers prepared 8,731 tax returns, resulting in more than $10 million in refunds and saved clients over $2.2 million in tax preparation fees. They'll prepare the returns at several locations throughout the city, including the following. There's Barr Library on Jefferson, Etzel Place Community Center on Plymouth, 5 Star Senior Center on Arsenal, Schlafly Library on Euclid, and then the Youth and Family Center on Cass. In addition, they'll also prepare state property tax credit claims at the International Institute and then also at Julia Davis Branch Library. Any questions on those two? Thank you very much.
I'd also like to introduce the Director of Housing for the Community Development Agency, who's here with us today, and his area includes the home repair program, the housing production, and all those related activities, and that's Bill Rata. Bill. And again, I'd be glad to try to answer any questions that the committee members may have.
It created a bit of an uproar, I guess, last year or so when we started cutting the the CUBDOs because I guess there was a sense that they were not doing enough in housing production, and they would have been funded from this the initial pool. Is that correct? The 3.1 million, the 19%. Is that?
Yes, last year that's what they were funded. Now there may be other areas. For instance, there were 3 CUBDOs that applied for street improvements in this bill, about $200,000, I think, in Dutchtown, CCBF, and another organization, the Shaw, Tower Grove area. Those 3 all received funding that wasn't in the public services, but was in for public improvements. But yeah, primarily there was about $1.1 million last year in the public services for CUBDOs. This year it's much less, but there still are organizations that receive funding: Tower Grove, Dutchtown, Hamilton Heights, and Riverview. Some of them receive funding that wasn't in public services there, but is in minor home repair, for instance.
At the peak, or not at the peak, that would probably be years ago, but say 2 years ago, how much were the CUBDOs getting at that point?
I don't know what the number was. I know there were a couple that were getting about $500,000 in. Now that money didn't come in the bill that you are seeing, but it came from transfers from aldermanic set-asides, I put it. Each ward was set aside anywhere from $50,000 to $200,000.
Okay.
And some of the aldermen would including me, would transfer some of that money into CUBDOs.
Do we have a order of magnitude? How much was getting transferred to CUBDOs?
I can get that, sure.
Well, I'm just kind of curious, because if the complaint was that we weren't doing enough, and this isn't a reflection on you, I guess I'm still trying to understand what HUD was trying to achieve, because I mean
I think they were trying to achieve more housing production. Okay. I think that's what I'm trying to get at, is there a real, did that materialize? Are we seeing? It is materializing.
We are seeing more dollars go into bricks and mortar, is that right?
For the $2.7 million this spring plus $4 million this fall, we're going to do two funding rounds a year, starting in 2014. So there's no question there will be more production. There was a lot of money you know, as I said, I transferred money as well to Dutchtown and.
Well, I did too.
So
I mean,
I'm not,
and of course I.
you know, and I was chairman of the committee that, you know, passed these bills, so I'm not pointing my finger at anyone but myself. You know, there was a lot of money being spent on salaries and staff that is not being spent now.
I just, I mean, we have a whole series, I guess the whole first 3 pages, which is $3.1 million that we're spending, I guess, on I'm sure these are all really meritorious things that we're spending it on, but I mean, I think if you took a poll of the aldermen, they'd probably prefer to see that spent on some of the cubdos than on some of these other things here.
Well, they absolutely would.
And I guess I'm just trying to figure out that, you know, our big brother in Washington, why they felt that these things were more important than our cubdos are, but
The money, why they felt it was more important, I think the local HUD office, as again, did not. I think there's two. I don't think it's an either or, Mr. Chairman. We were again, that the money that was being transferred into the cubdos was not public service money.
okay.
That was money that was being allocated to each ward, and the alderman would transfer it into the cubdos.
Do you, and again, I'm not trying to rework what you did, but I'm just kind of thinking of this out loud, and I probably should have asked you this before you came over here, and I don't mean to, kind of put you on the spot, but, I mean, if we decided, see, I guess my sense was that there was a complaint that we were kind of creating, these organizations that were just so dependent on block grant money that they, couldn't exist without it. And now I see us sending money out to all these different entities here, and I think we're going to end up creating a bunch of these things that are going to end up being dependent upon block grant money. And I guess these things were always getting funded before. Is that right?
Half of them are new. Half of them are new. About roughly half. I think 28 of the activities that we're funding there are new. So there's a lot of. I think there will be more turnover now, not less, because what had been occurring for years is the same organizations would get funded annually, and a lot of it was political. Okay, what HUD said was take the politics out of it, have a transparent process, open up the request for proposals, set eligibility criteria and eligible activities, and then rate them fairly and appropriately. And that's what we did with outside raters. Now I expect some of these to continue to get funded. I expect new different organizations to come in, as they did this year and last year. And I think it's opened up the funding process to organizations that do a lot of good work throughout the city. And I don't think, look, obviously I was an alderman for a long time. I know it's preferable to the alderman to do it the old way, the way we did it for years. But I think this is a fair, more transparent process of awarding grants.
And
we don't have to fund it at 19%. We could fund it at 10%, but I think I think we'd have more complaints from the aldermen if we funded it 10% than a 19%.
I guess in my thought was, the biggest concern I have about all the cubdos that are going to, you know, that are going away, I mean, I think we're going to lose a couple more this year, is that building consensus in a community is really kind of kind of developing the social fabric of a neighborhood so that you have kind of a gathering point and a way to communicate and a way for a neighborhood to kind of make decisions and kind of keep on track. And I know in my case, and I can't speak for others, that those cubdos were kind of a way of, you know, with staff that was in the neighborhoods, that when controversial land use issues would come up or something like that, that we had the ability to go out and kind of garner neighborhood, you know, sentiment. And that's a really, for me, that, you know, I mean, that would be a very time-consuming thing. And I just have concern. I mean, the cubdo in my area is going to end up surviving. I'm just concerned about other parts of the city. You know, what that's going to happen to other parts of the city, and what what that's going to do to the alderman's workload or their ability to, you know, just hand off.
Yeah.
You know, hand off.
Comment on that. I'd like to comment on that, Mr. Chairman. One of the things that I experienced in all this, and I probably have voiced my opinion before, you know, in quantifying services to the public is always very difficult. And most people, if they don't see brick and mortar, they don't necessarily assume that anything is being accomplished. But aside from that, there's a lot that needs to be accomplished when we talk about cultural enrichment and preparing a community to even receive the brick and mortar, which is a lot of what some of the cubdos did. But I also know that it can be done without a cubdo. So one of the things we're going to have to do from the city standpoint, and I see some of this reflected and some of the opportunities here in this proposal, is to work with established organizations that have good track records and incorporate them more into who we are and what we're trying to accomplish. And many of them do this work every day anyway. So I'm kind of okay with where we are. I think that probably we did lose some opportunities when we shut ourselves down and the only vehicle of communication and/or services only came from one entity, and we didn't always know how good that was. That was another problem too, just being able to quantify exactly what was taking place. So I think we're going to have to prepare ourselves to do our jobs a little bit different. I think it'll be more comprehensive, and I think that as we move forward, residents will be more a part of, overall more part of decision making, because with our basic neighborhood associations, you know, our block units, more information will go out to them. They'll be more involved up front, and we've seen that this last year, how many people have come down for public meetings, and that's the citizenship. And it's not selective citizenship. It's open, it's more wide open to the public. So it's different, but I think we're going to be okay in the long run. We just got to put a little more effort into it.
Thank you. Let me also add the, you know, the idea that the cubdos are, you know, representing a neighborhood. That in a sense, that's true, but they're, I don't know the exact number, but I bet there were only maybe last year 10 cubdos. Well, there's 28 wards. So these organizations, yes, they're representing a neighborhood, but they're certainly not, the city's not covered with the organization. So it's, I agree with you. I think we're just gonna, we find other ways to get citizen input from the community.
Okay. Are there any other questions, or what appears we're lacking a quorum, so I guess we can consider this, do we have a public, do we have a requirement for public hearing? Is that the deal before this passes,
I
or?
think we do, don't we, Dave?
For this bill?
Yeah,
For
for this bill.
This definitely meets it, so,
Okay, so, well, I guess we consider at least heard today then.
definitely.
And then I guess that'll be it then. Is there any other comments or anything, or?
Okay. Then, are we looking at next Wednesday?
Next Wednesday will be the next HUD's meeting. I guess we'll go ahead and put it on that, and hopefully we'll be able to get a quorum for that meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Meeting adjourned.